one of my favourite techniques on a card is to sort of have a strip of ink blending off to one side with some overstamping in the same colour of ink using a sentiment and some splashes of the same ink. So I thought I would do a quick tips video showing how I ink blend a panel. So my first tip is to stick down your card, because otherwise you're always getting your fingers in the ink and it moves around all over the place and you don't get the ink exactly where you want it. So that's my first tip. Then my second tip is, I think you can use like any dye ink to ink blend with, but obviously distress inks, distress oxides are probably the best two. But today I'm going to be using this Aladine Ink dye ink pad. I really like the colour. It's called Petrol, so it's a lovely sort of greeny blue colour. So you do always get better results with your ink blending when your sponge has already got some ink in. So if you're using a new sponge, I recommend squishing your ink pad onto your surface a few times and picking up the ink into the sponge. But once you've already got it primed, you can just tap it on the ink pad and pick the ink up that way. I also recommend sort of pretending like you're ink blending onto your glass mat, just to make sure you've got an even coverage of ink all over your sponge and you haven't just picked up a splodge of ink, like say you just re-inked your ink pad or something. You don't want to go in there and pick up a big splodge that's then going to transfer. So just swirl it around on your glass mat first. Okay, so then my next tip is use circles. Go whichever direction you want. Sometimes I change my mind, sometimes I go anti-clockwise, sometimes I go clockwise. It just depends what day it is, really. So you're going to go circular motions and you're going to not apply too much pressure. So you want to load up your sponge. I've got plenty of ink on now. And yeah, so go circular motions and not too much pressure. And then you go back over the same areas to build up the colour. And remember, for this one I just want a strip of colour down my card, so I'm making sure to definitely do less pressure towards the two edges so that I don't get any harsh lines. But if you did, you could just ink blend the whole panel and change your mind. So okay, I want it to be a bit more intense in the middle, so going back in again, and there we have it. Now if I hold this up close, you do have here a few, you can kind of see it, a few smudgy marks of where the edge of the tool was, mostly in that bottom corner, but I don't think that makes any difference. Once you've done the overstamping and a bit of splashing on it, you're not going to notice that at all. So we've done the ink blending. Now I had previously made a card on my Crafty Potential channel, so I'm kind of like recreating the background for that card. So in that card I used this Butterfly Dreams Magazine Freebie. I think it was an issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft. I can't remember the issue number, but I'll put a link in the description. So I'm going to use the Thinking of You. Well, actually, I used the Thinking of You last time. I'm going to use Happy Birthday this time. And then I want an acrylic block. And then, oh, another tip is, so many people say you're supposed to take the ink pad to the stamp and stamp ink the stamp up like this, but I don't think it makes any difference. Whatever's easier for you, I think, is going to be the best tip. And actually I have another tip to share, because this is a cheap Magazine Freebie stamp. They don't always stamp that brilliantly, but the tip is to take an embossing ink pad and ink up your stamp, then ink it up with your coloured ink, and you get a way crisper impression. This was the first one, straight from the packet, and it's blotchy and awful, and then that's after using the embossing ink first, so it really does make a difference. Sometimes it's alright, whoa, sometimes it lasts, yes, I think it's going to last for a few images, that's alright. So I think I'm going to just move that so that it's straight, so I get my stamping a bit straight. And then I'm literally just going to ink up the stamp and just stamp in a few different places just to create the background. And you can do second generation too, it looks nice. Maybe an extra second generation coming off there, and a smidge there. Yep, I like that. And then, to finish this background, I want some splashes. Now, I'm going to do splashes of just water and splashes of ink, I think. So for the, I'm going to squish some ink out for the ink splashes, but I'll do the water splashes first. So, the water splashes, I like to use a nice fine paintbrush. This is a number 2 round paintbrush. I just got these cheap on Amazon. It was like a whole set of different sizes. So just pick up some water, and then I like to hold the brush quite near the end and tap with the index finger of my other hand to get lovely little round dots. I've seen a lot of people using the Tim Holtz Distress Sprayer to do this technique, but I don't personally like all of the jaggedy splotches that you get, and they're really big. I like the tiny little splotches. So you just want to leave that for a few seconds just to pick up the ink, and it works really nicely with these Aladine inks as well. So you can see the tiny little spots on there. And then we're just going to do exactly the same thing for the blue. I often like to have a bit of the blue, or whatever colour you're using, come into the white space, just to make it look really nice. And if you wanted to go even further, something else that I love to do is to take some Nuvo Embellishment Mousse or Cosmic Shimmer Gilding Polish. They do give slightly different results, but either work for this technique. You can't really tell the difference that much. You can just scrape out a smidgen, plop it in either the ink or the water, wherever. And then I'm going to use, oops, you can't see. Okay, I'm going to use the palette knife just to mix it into the fluid. Just so it's in more of a solution than a paste now. And I might need a smidgen more water, oops, unless I can get some of that in there, that might be alright. Okay, so now we've got a nice pearly solution. And just add a few more splashes on to add a gorgeous shimmery look. So, this is my quick tip video showing you how I ink blend a strip and do the overstamping and the splattering. And at the end of this video, and probably in the thumbnail, I'll put in a photo of the finished card from my previous video on my Crafty Potential channel, and I'll probably put the link below the video as well. So, hope you enjoyed watching, and see you again next time. Bye.